Hey today? Yes, it is. We as the praise team get to welcome you guys today, right? We're welcome, yes? Everybody, we're very excited they're all here, right? Yes. So, if you are visiting with us, in front of you, maybe not directly in your chair, but to the right and the left, you'll see a little card. And you can fill out your information and you can put it in the back for us. We would love to know you were here. Oh, excellent. Henry, good job. My Diana, right here. Also on that card, if you have a prayer request, whether it's a need, something on your heart, something you want to praise about, feel free to put that on there too. We have amazing prayer warriors. We like to pray for those. We actually meet each week, dedicated time, and pray, but there's a bunch of us that pray throughout the week for all of those, so please put that on there too. So welcome. We're very excited you're here. We are going to be singing songs today about love and God's love and who we get to love. Even those people who, yes, it's very common to love the people sitting here in the room. But what about those who aren't sitting here in the room? So I want to invite you guys to stand with us, and we're going to sing the greatest commands about God's love. Who or what will we actually fear? You hear me when I call, you are my morning song. Though darkness fills the night, it cannot hide the light. Whom shall I fear? You crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield, though troubles linger.
stands behind. The God of angel armies is always side by side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
Spirits were high. Mother, father, my brothers all joined in singing Christmas hymns as we marched across the hill. It was the first time in nearly 6 years that such joy had flooded these ancient slopes. At the top of the hill, their hymn trailed to silence. The marchers halted uncertainly. Far below, Burin was still surrounded by tanks, bulldozers, and other military vehicles. But this was December 25th, the morning that we were supposed to return home. Why were they still there? In the distance, a soldier shouted, and he realized we had been seen. A cannon blast sheared the silence, and then another, and then a third. The soldiers opened fire not on the villagers, but on the town itself. Tank shells shrieked into the village, exploding in fiery destruction. Houses blew apart like paper, stones and dust flew amid the red flames and billowing black smoke. One shell slammed a wall, blowing off part of the roof. The bell tower of the church teetered, and the bronze bell kneeling somehow held amidst the dust of the cannon. For nearly 5 minutes, explosions rocked Burin, the house collapsing, home collapsing against home, fire spreading through fallen town. Then all was silent, except for the weeping and terrified screams. Mother and father stood shaking, huddled together with my brothers. In a numbness of horror, they watched as bulldozers plowed through the ruins, knocking down much of what had not been blown apart at the time. At last, father said, "To my brother or to God, we're not sure which, forgive him." And then he led our family back. Merry Christmas, right? It's amazing what happens when we decide that another is less than us, is dangerous, is evil, and is unworthy. And it doesn't start with the will to destroy, it starts with believing the worst about another people. Exodus 1 gives us a somewhat similar story. Eventually, a new king came to power who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. A new dynasty rises in Egypt, somebody who doesn't know the story of how Joseph rescued an entire region. Not just the Egyptians, not just their home, but the known world. And when we forget those shared stories, it becomes really easy to see the worst in others. He said to his people, "Look at the people of Israel. They now outnumber us and are stronger than we. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country." So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar, to make bricks, and to do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands. Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave the order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. When you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's order. They allowed the boys to live. The king of Egypt looks at the Hebrew population in his country, and he sees them not for what they have done, but what he's afraid they might do. No, he's never, ever been guilty of seeing the worst in other people, have they? Never done it. We read this story and it makes no sense to us because we wonder how we could look at another people, somebody who don't share our traditions, our music, our ways, our story, and see them as anything but nice, kind neighbors, right? How dare Pharaoh, how dare us? If this happens, then they might. And if that were to happen, then we might lose. And because of the possibilities that I've come up with in my head and no other places, Pharaoh's got a great imagination. I'll give him credit for that. Because of this, we have to destroy. One of my favorite stories in the New Testament, one that I shared with y'all relatively often, and as we started our class on the parables, one I shared, again, comes from Jesus' own disciples as they walked through Samaria. A group of guys who, just the day before, couldn't manage to cast out a demon in all of their apostolic best, look at Jesus after they've been rejected from a Samaritan village and say, should we call down fire from heaven to destroy them? Because doing good for God, they couldn't muster the faith. But to destroy somebody who they already hate, they have that passion. There's something deeply human about that. And they see the Samaritans as enemies, as other. Not as somebody involved in the story of God, not as somebody worthy of that mercy or grace, but as something to be feared because of what they might do. Pharaoh, same way. Works them, I love the phrase, without mercy. Because he cannot imagine anything good coming from them. And his first couple of plans don't work. I identify with Pharaoh. Usually the stuff I plan doesn't come off very well either the first few times. But after a couple of attempts, he realizes that he has in his head a foolproof solution. What if we just kill him? Thought process that's happened 100 times throughout history. If we just don't let them live anymore, then we don't have a problem. So he talks to the midwives, on pain of death. Hey, if it's a boy, kill him. And now the midwives have a choice to make, right? It says they fear God, but my guess is they also probably like living. And Pharaoh has given them command, and they have to decide what they're going to do. Because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's order. They allowed the boys to live. The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. It's their response when Pharaoh asks, why are you letting them live? And I don't know if this was calculated or not, but I can tell you this, it probably plays into his fear. That they're strong. They're self-sufficient. They don't wait. They don't need help. They're more vigorous. They have their babies so quickly that we cannot get there in time. So God was good to the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply and grow more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of his own. Then the Pharaoh gave his final order to all his people. Bypassing the midwives, skipping over a small, calculated plot, he now tells everyone, throw every newborn Hebrew boy in the Nile River. There's your command. Probably a pretty hard time to be a Hebrew person living in the land of Egypt, wouldn't you agree? Go with 18-hour work days, fingers dead to the bone. Not a whole lot of sustenance being given out in your direction, slave drivers at your back. A command that all of your sons be killed in the Nile River. And it's not just a few people looking to do the damage, the entire country has been turned against you. This sounds like 100 moments throughout history. Probably more. But one of the things I'm reminded of, one of the things that probably should catch your attention if you're a student of the Old Testament, the Bible, throughout the law, one of the things that God tells his people, ones who have already been rescued and redeemed out of Egypt, is that they need to pay attention to how they treat the foreigners in their land. Why? Rob, you know it. What is it? Because you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. We just had this conversation. Come on. Put an elder on the spot. That's called job security. No, it's not. If I'm unemployed next week, y'all can look back at the live stream and know exactly what happened. Because you were them once. And you know what it's like. And one of the things that God assures the people through both the law and the prophets over and over again is, if you fail to heed this warning, I will hear their cries. You have to wonder whether the people of Israel are going to remember the Exodus, whether that's going to stick in their memory, or if they become people who forget the same way that the Pharaohs forget. Whether they remember their shared story. The people of Israel, the Hebrew people, not even the people of Israel yet in this moment, cry out. God hears their cry. And Exodus 2 begins the story of Moses. Chapter 1 gives you the background. Here's what's going on. And in the midst of all of that chaos, in the midst of that type of murder and of hatred, we get this. About that time, a man and a woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant. She gave birth to a son that she saw. He was a special baby and kept him hidden for 3 months, which I got to give her all sorts of credit in the world. Because I've had 3 now go through those first 3 month stages of life, and I have no idea how I could have hidden them from anything. That one especially had some pipes. Absolute wailer of her. I don't know how she did it, but somehow she does it. She loves her son. She sees something special in him. She's going to protect him as best she can, but 3 months. And she has to decide how she's going to play this too, because are you willing to die? And I love that she follows the letter of the law, if not the spirit of the law. Because the next few verses talk about how she takes a basket of lines with a pitch, makes it a nice floating mini boat, and she pushes the baby boy into the Nile River. Not exactly the safest river in the world to send a small child floating. There are large, rather hungry creatures that also live in the water of the Nile. And then her daughter watches and waits. What's going on? And I don't even want to begin to imagine what has to go on in the heart and mind of a person who has just had to make this decision. Right? Put yourself in that spot. I just see heads going back and forth. No. Pass. Don't want to. Would rather not. What do? You have other kids, you have families, you lose their lives and yours, or she does what she thinks is best in the moment. There's a shred of hope that tells her, if she does this, then maybe, just maybe. And for about the umpteenth time in what is a relatively short section of the Bible thus far, Genesis and the first 2 chapters of Exodus, we see God show up in an unexpected and powerful way. And I would point out right now that for the Hebrew people, God shows up in the form of the enemy, right? Because who comes wandering into the water but Pharaoh's own daughter? Verse 5, soon Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the river banks. When the princess saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying. She felt sorry for him. And then she says the most dangerous thing she could have said, this must be one of the Hebrew children. Then the baby's sister approached the princess. Should I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? And the ball is now in the princess's. How is she going to proceed? Is she going to follow the will of her father? She's a teenage girl, so probably not. Is she? Well done, Tony. Thank you. Is she going to heed his order? Is he going to allow this to take place? Are the maids that are with her going to remind her of what she's risking by doing this? Yes, please do, the princess replied. So the girl went and called the baby's mother. Take this baby and nurse him for me, the princess told the baby's mom. I'll pay you for your help. So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. The princess named him Moses. She explained, I lifted him out. One of the things I'm reminded as a student of the Bible over and over is that the ways in which God works are numerous and often unexplainable. I'll also add that they are never as clean as I would like them to be, right? What makes this story go cleaner than the hand of God reaching down and flicking Pharaoh off of the face of the earth and letting the new guy know that they don't get to do that? That's the clean, easy option, right? That's the one that saved the largest number of people from the murderous intentions of the idiot on the throne. But that's not how the story goes. God doesn't stop the chaos. God doesn't boom out a voice from heaven and set the world right. Instead, God takes the shreds of faith that exist. Two midwives, and a mom, and a princess who doesn't know God. And a Pharaoh, who I still don't know how he navigates that relationship, right? And in the midst of all of the mess, what we see is the promise of God slowly coming to fruition. Now, I would point out that it is not instant. Chapter 2 of Exodus does not end with a statement, and suddenly the murder of the Hebrew boys ends. Moses grows up as the odd child out. The Hebrew in Pharaoh's house, the one who survived when so many others died, with a question mark hanging over his head. Moses' mom watches him grow up from afar while somebody else raises him. And they wonder, I imagine, every single day whether their child is going to survive in that man's house. Somehow, in the midst of all of that, God continues. It's not the surefire story you write where everything goes well, correct? If you want something nice and clean and pretty, this isn't how it goes. And yet, in a few years, the redemption of God shows up in the form of the Hebrew who is the grandson of faith. Now that's probably enough to remind you that we live in a messy, complex, complicated world. Agreed? It has been that way for a very, 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 very long time. For as long as people have been here messing around with stuff, it has been messy and complex and complicated. And therein lies the danger in drawing clean lines about who counts and who doesn't, who is a human being and who is less than. And if you're a student of history, you can point out all of the ways that this has gone horribly wrong before, and yet somehow that doesn't stop us from repeating the same mistakes over and over and over the people who came before us. Each generation has its own story of the decisions they've made along the way to decide. Somebody else doesn't. What level of hubris does it take to think you have all of the solutions? You got to be pretty certain that you're God in order to believe that you have the solutions to all of the world's problems. I'm not there. I can barely get my youngest child to eat food when I want him to. We can't keep up with what his favorites are. We can cook his favorite meal, and suddenly he's turning his nose up at it, because that's not what it is anymore. What I am certain of at the end of stories like this one, and the way that it unfolds, is not that human beings have all of the solutions. If you look at the story, human beings have a whole lot of questions and not a whole lot of answers. And when they do make hard decisions, they're not always in the right direction. See the Pharaoh, who's doing what he thinks is best for his people, but he's doing so at the expense of others. And that takes me back to Elias, who at the age of 13 had his village destroyed, the one who he'd been held out of 14. What do you do with this? How many of you get angry? This is a bit of a civil war that's taking place in his home country. You think joining the insurgents may begin to sound like a pretty good idea, right? They took your home, they killed your friends and family. It's time to fight back. It's time to get even, right? We've watched this story play out daily all around the world. Elias chooses a different way. Because what Elias begins to feel, it's not hatred, it's not bitterness, it's not animosity, though if we read this story, he certainly works through all that. What he feels is pity for the people who see so much danger in people like him, his family. And over time, Elias becomes priest, Melchite order of the Catholic, and then a regional bishop. And he begins to serve some of the very people who helped destroy his home. He realizes that there are all of these weaknesses in the system that are helping generate this sort of hatred between people who don't know each other. So he does the thing that nobody expects, and plenty of people told him it was a bad idea, and several people tried to stop him finally. He creates a school that educates kids no matter their race, religion, background. One in the Eastern Mediterranean that has students who are Jewish, who are Druze, who are Muslim, who are Christian. He creates a common table. Because the sort of animosity that comes about, that we've talked about, comes about when you forget your shared humanity. He tries to help people remember their shared humanity. I think one of the most important things we can do in a time where we live in such a divided world, community, culture, all of them, is remember first and foremost our shared humanity. The one that we would call enemy is still the creation and image of the one we call God. And if we cannot remember, if we cannot function in that, then we are far more likely to be Pharaoh than Jesus. And like Pharaoh, we will work our rear ends off to justify our actions and calling. But what we should be taking is the path of the one who sacrifices everything for others, including the ones who call him. This is why these stories matter. Elias Charcot, still living. I believe at this point he received the Nobel Peace Prize. He's been able to travel and speak all over the world. He still is involved in the school he created. He continues to have students in the middle of northern Galilee who are Druze, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian. Because he knows that if the future is going to be different for his people, and for the people who are his neighbors, that it starts by taking the time to treat each other as people first. We cannot make the mistake that Pharaoh made. So look at the Hebrews and see the end. Because when we do that, we are told over and over that God will hear the cry of the oppressed. Rise up against the oppressed. It matters. How we see and talk about those whom we disagree matters. I think that's probably a pretty good place to leave it.
So before we begin, we're going to do a special reading. It's a reflective reading. Looked down from a broken sky, traced out by the city lights, my world from a mile high, best seat in the house tonight. Touch down on the cold black top, hold on for the sudden stop. Breathe in the familiar shock of confusion and chaos. All those people going somewhere, why have I never cared?
Give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything that I keep missing. Give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the broken-hearted, the ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones who are forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see.
Step out on the busy street. See a girl and our eyes meet. She does her best to smile at me and hide what's underneath. There's a man just to her right, black suit and a bright red tie. Too ashamed to tell his wife he's out of work, he's buying time. All those people going somewhere. Why have I never cared?
Give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything that I keep missing. Give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the brokenhearted, for the ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see.
I've been there a million times. A couple million lives just moving past me by. I swear, I never thought that it was wrong. But I want a second glance. So give me a second chance to see the way you've seen the people all along.
Give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything that I keep missing. Give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the brokenhearted, the ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see.
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up. To see you shining in the light of your glory. Lord, pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up. To see you shining in the light of your glory. Lord, pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy. Holy, holy, holy.
I was baptized on June 14th, 1964, right over in that building across the parking lot. Ever since then, when some of you were there, and you'll probably admit this, that my mom probably told the preacher ahead of time to hold me down just a little bit longer than normal to make sure I was good to go. And I kind of felt that for a while. So, but since then, I did the math, and it was basically over 3,000 times that I have been privileged to partake of the Lord's Supper. Over 3,000 times. And that includes, being away in the army or whatever it took not to be here. There used to be a table up here, and I swear that everybody that has gone to a Christian church or a Church of Christ in the last 80 years have seen a table up here. And what did it say on that table? In remembrance of me. You want to look at that table back there? There's one that says it right there that used to be up here. But you could not go anywhere without seeing a communion table that didn't say, in remembrance of me. And I was wondering this week just what I was going to say today. And I was wondering, why did it have to be printed on the front of the table? And then I realized God did the same thing. He gave us tablets of stone, but then, then what happened? It turned into being imprinted on our hearts. How does that happen? What kind of love does that take? And we're going to talk about that in just a second. To print those words on our hearts, so we don't have to see them up here. They are there. And sometimes, yes, when you're a Christian, it takes a while to understand God's love. And I'm going to try and help you understand that with a little story. At the end of that story, I'm going to ask 2 questions. So please listen carefully to this story. There's a young man lived down the coast of California, where the waters are warm, the sun is out, and he sat, as he grew older, he sat by the shore and looked out at all the sailboats going by, all the ships and the sailboats. But he was really interested in sailboats. And he said, someday I'm going to have me a sailboat. And someday I'm going to sail right down this coast and see what's down at the bottom of the other end of it. And so, as time went on, he saved his money. Of course, he got married. And the wife said, well, why do you want this sailboat? And he said, I've always wanted a sailboat. I want to take a trip. And so, during the course of the marriage, they had 2 sons close together. And if you've ever raised 2 sons, you know what that can mean. There's fighting, and rambunctiousness, and tumbling, and wrestling, and the whole